Okay, so what is executive functions? So really, it's about looking at an activity, looking at a task, and how we can plan and prepare for that. So we talk about executive functions as being those higher order cognitive skills, and it's all about how we can regulate our behavior and the activities that we do. It's about being self-directed. It's about being undistracted, how quickly you can, if something changes, how quickly you can adapt to that change, and taking all the concepts and ideas that you have from your your life experiences and how you can put those all together. And all of that is related to your executive functions. Okay. So they appear as early as infancy, but they're not really fully developed until about young adulthood, so 21, 22, maybe even a little bit older. And it's quite useful to notice how someone responds when they're younger in terms of executive functions is usually a good idea of how they're going to respond when they're older. So it's a case of, so if I realize, so on a Wednesday, it's bin day, if I come home on a Tuesday night, for example, and I see that all my neighbors have their bins out, I'm going to put it in my head, okay, I need to get our bins out as well. I then go off on a tangent and I forget. And then the next morning, as I'm leaving for work, I realize, oh my gosh, I haven't taken the bins out. I look at the clock or the watch and I can see actually I've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to use my previous experience of going, yeah, I'm not taking anyone anywhere else today, so I've got time to quickly do that. If, for example, I was thinking, oh, I've got to drop Noah somewhere or take the dogs to clinic, then I would just have to go, okay, I'm going to be late if I do it. What I might do is just go, oh yeah, I might have loads of time. I think I've got loads of time, but that's when I'm not using my executive functions to go back and think, actually, the last time this is what happened. Okay. So that's just a little bit of the brain for you. We talk about all the different lobes. So your frontal lobe is really where all your emotions and your problem solving happens. That's just a little share there. Okay. So executive functioning skills, really, we think of it as 4 kind of areas. You'll quite often hear the term working memory, processing speed, planning, that type of thing. So when we think about working memory, that is how we can remember, manipulate, and use short-term information. Okay, so a student can use this when they read some text on say an exam. So look at the text, hold that information, and then use that to answer the questions. Processing speed is about how well we can focus, pay attention, and then discern that information. If you have slow processing speed, it's going to affect things like your working memory, your organization, your planning, your attention, and what happens quite often is that slow processing speed can be mistaken for executive function difficulties. Okay. Planning, that's how you can think about being strategic and organized because you know what the outcome is. This is the goal, so I'm going to do steps A, B, and C. Prioritizing is just that, knowing, okay, this is more urgent than that, so I have to do this now, rather than getting stuck in, well, I wrote down 1, 2, 3 and not being able to shift, if that makes sense. Brain flexibility is a big one. It's also sometimes called your mental flexibility. And when you are changing perspectives, it's when you are shifting your mindset, you're shifting your attitude to fit that situation. So a lot of us had to do that with COVID, with lockdown, and some of us did it better than others. Okay. It's about how quickly we can switch from one mental task to another one, or think about lots of things at the same time. Changing attention is how you're going to keep track of all the multiple things that you're doing at that one time. Self-monitoring, you're perceiving your emotions, reflecting on your past actions, how things made you feel, and that's quite linked with your self-regulation. So managing your emotions, your behavior, and your intention, that emotional control. Okay. So when a child or an adult has difficulties with executive functioning, they could have difficulties with all of these, one of these, just a few of these. Okay. Right. So when we talk about the difficulties we can see, I'm just going to run through these and then I'm going to give you just a few more examples. So what does executive functioning difficulties look like? So this is the adult, the child who can't keep track of times. They can't make a plan, or they'll make a plan, but then they can't stick to it. So they can't make sure that they're going to finish on time. You know, looking for more information, thinking, oh, the last time I did this, that happened. So maybe I can tweak it slightly. Okay. So if you have, I'm just going to go through some of the bits from the previous slide. So if you have difficulties with working memory, what you're going to find is, so say, for example, you've got a child at secondary school, they are really going to struggle to take notes from lectures. So writing and listening at the same time. It's probably one of the reasons I really struggled at university, because that whole thing of writing and listening and then looking, it's just really hard. It's when we quickly experience information overload, when we get a lot of things. Things like mental maths could be really hard for someone if you have to follow multi-step directions. Okay, so if someone says to you, okay, I want you to, we're going to make a box, and first you're going to color in this section, then you're going to do that section, then you're going to cut it on these lines, then you're going to fold it. So all of those things, for someone to be able to retain all of that and carrying it out in the correct sequence. Quite often you see kids who will, they'll put their hands up, and by the time the teachers got to them, they've forgotten what they want to say, or they will just start speaking because they know that they're going to forget what they want to say. It's sometimes you'll see a child has to read, or an adult has to read a passage or paragraph over and over and over because they keep on losing track of it. Same thing with conversations. They struggle to keep track of conversations. Okay. A little bit more detail about your mental flexibility. You can find that sometimes people can become quite rigid and they become quite fixated on certain aspects. So they want to sit in the same place, eat the same food, wear the same clothes. They really struggle with any transition. So between classes, activities, a weekend versus a weekday, a holiday versus a normal day. And so these are the kids who really struggle and they just can't focus, can't cope with these changes. We could also see that they might become hyper-focused, okay, on a topic or an idea or an activity. And they can really struggle to switch gears. This is going to come in later, but I'm just going to say it now again, and I'll say it throughout. If you have an adult or a child who has ADHD, they generally have executive dysfunction, okay? Because ADHD is, as you'll see as we go along, is basically executive functioning. So yeah, just bear that in mind if you can think of anyone who has ADHD. Yeah, okay. Impulse control. So you might find that these kids make careless mistakes because they just want to get things done. They might, as soon as there's a problem, they're just going to give up because actually I can't cope with that. I can't face the problem or the challenge. They are going to be, sorry about that, they're going to be just shouting at the answer not raising their hand. They might be like me and do all the fun parts of an activity first and leave all the hard parts for later. These are the kids who, so if I see them for assessment, I'll be reading instructions and they will either start before I finished giving the instructions, or they'll ask questions, which if they had waited, it would have come later, if that makes sense. They might be impulsive, engage in risky behavior, homework doesn't get done, gets avoided. They struggle to take turns, interrupting others, and quite often will be in people's personal space, okay, because they don't have that impulse control. When it comes to planning, prioritizing, difficulties you might see is that they can't break down a big assignment into smaller pieces, so they can't do that whole, okay, this is the big idea, let's break it down into little pieces to make it more manageable. And therefore, when they get a big project, they won't know where to start. They also get stuck quite easily in that thing. Their assignments will be late because they didn't leave enough time. And if they're going to have an exam, they would much prefer to have like multiple choice questions rather than open-ended responses. Again, they're going to struggle to take notes because they can't decide what is more important than something else. So then they write everything down. And that ties in with those difficulties making decisions, strategizing, and problem solving. Okay. Emotional control. These kids and adults, and I say adults because, yeah, it affects adults as well, can have quite a lot of angry outbursts at the slightest little thing that goes wrong, or they can feel wronged or provoked. They will very quickly say something is unfair. They will struggle to persevere and just keep going. Any kind of negative situation, if they get told off, if they get a bad grade, if they lose a game, they will really overreact to that situation. They might sometimes just unexpectedly laugh or burst into tears, appear to have quite rapid mood changes, and not care about other people's feelings. Okay. If you would like, I can, well, actually, I've sent Tom the handouts already, so he can send them on to you. Then we've got task initiation. So, as I said earlier, they don't know where to start on an activity. And then also, if they take a break, they struggle to refocus, struggle to get back on track. They'll always put things off to the last minute, really good at procrastinating and finding other things to do, such as, oh, let me sharpen my pencil, or let's go have a cup of tea, or where is that item, and then go off. If, however, they are getting fixed on their work, they will have their head down and they're going to be working. They might also ask for help a lot, even when you know that they know the answer and that they are completely capable of that work. Okay. If they have difficulties with self-monitoring, they will be unaware of how much effort they do or don't put into their work. They think of grades as being kind of magical, and you might find that they're really surprised by grades, poor grades, or really confused by them, and they can't relate how what they did in a test would have led to that outcome. They really struggle to see when their negative behavior affects others. They might talk too loudly or too quickly. These are the kids where the teacher's constantly saying, stop touching that, put it down, sit down, do your work, don't look out the window. So they just, really distractible, and they can't gauge kind of what is appropriate for different social situations. They may also have really annoying behaviors like tapping their pencil, jiggling their knees. I do that all the time. And they can't control it. So even when someone complains, they're still going to be doing it. In terms of that organization, they're going to lose books and lose notes and letters and not try and make changes for that organization. So when you're older, that child will think, okay, all my letters for home, I'm going to put in here, and they're always going to put it in there so that he doesn't get lost. They're not going to make those connections. They really struggle using a planner or a diary. They can't organize things. So like if you look at their backpack, I'm just thinking back to my boys, sometimes I'd open their backpack and it would be like, just what the heck has happened in there? Because you can't find anything. You know, like having systems for things. I remember my son, who is my eldest son, has got Asperger's, and he has just started university. Well, just started. He's coming to the end of his first year, and he's always amazed when he looks at like if I ask him for IT help, he's doing computer science, he'll come and he'll go, there is no structure or organization to your folders. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And he just, he's horrified by things like that. Okay. So what does this all, oh, sorry, ahead of myself. So if we can think of kind of functionally how this is going to affect us, we think about the whole idea of you plan something, you organize it, and then you do it. Yeah. And that will be for everything that you have to do. So any chores you have to do, you have to plan them, you have to fit them in, and then you have to do it. Okay. Homework, schoolwork, dressed and undressed, that routine from when they're coming from school at the end of the day, you know, managing their time, planning. So you can see that it really does affect quite a lot, almost everything. And yeah. So one of the things I do a lot with some of the older kids I work with is I'm kind of like an executive functioning coach, and we look at just these bits. Yeah. Okay. So if you think about your own executive functioning, it's things like, are you able to look after yourself? Are you able to say, okay, these are the things I need to do for myself. I need to moisturize. I need to have a bath or a shower. I need to do all of these things, all of those self-care things. Yeah. And quite often you'll find that this will be seriously lacking. I was diagnosed with ADHD last February, so 2020. And I went for a diagnosis because I thought I had autism because of some of the things that I did and how I did them. But actually, when I think about it now, I look at things like I have spare toothbrushes everywhere, because some mornings I used to be so disorganized that I couldn't actually, like brushing my teeth, I'd say, yeah, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I have a toothbrush at work and in all my bags as well. Being on time, I'd always be like, yeah, I can make it, I can make it. And then I'm either really early or quite late. And that comes with your time management, you know, knowing that it always takes me 3 hours to do this report. So why I now suddenly think I can do it in 2 hours, I don't know. Not losing things. I am constantly losing my phone, my keys, just all the time. And then thinking back and not making that same mistake. And then just being able to problem solve. Okay. So if you think your child has any of those difficulties, or if you have any of those difficulties, what we suggest is that there are a few things that you can do. Okay, so you want to practice a skill quite often, so a few times a week. So if you want to work on packing your bag and using a list, for example, which is one of the strategies, you want to practice that often, because once is not going to be enough. Okay, so if you have dysfunctional executive functions, you are going to have to practice it quite a few times. And what you then do is you're going to slowly increase that challenge, increase that level of difficulty, because otherwise we get bored. So you just want to challenge them the whole time until they can do something quite complex. Wherever possible, try and add in a physical activity. I use myself because I do have shocking executive functions. I work best if I can move. So if I can write something down, or if I can walk to something, or just do some physical activity before, is really, really crucial. If you, as a parent or carer or teacher, if you are struggling with your own executive functions, then work on those as well. Okay. Because it's all about being a role model at the end of it. Okay. Right, I'm just going to have a quick drink. Are there any questions or anything right now before I carry on? I'm going to assume that's a no. Okay. So if you are thinking about home, and this is something I would do whether you know your child has difficulties with executive functioning or not. It's just really good kind of habits to get into. It's really good skills to have for secondary school, university, work, volunteering, any aspect of your work. It's really, really important to be able to do these things. So I say just always practice them. Okay. Setting a routine, but also sticking to it. And as an adult with ADHD, executive functioning difficulties, I get a lot of comfort from routines. It helps me stay organized. It helps me stay on task. Okay. Homework after school, always kind of say, this is when we do homework, and stick to it. Don't today because, it's a lovely day outside and we just want to play, then say, okay, we're not going to do our homework. We're going to leave it because you're just going to end up with a massive explosion later. Okay, so if your routine is come home, have a snack, have a little play, get changed, then do homework, stick to those. But also something that's really important with homework is find out from teachers how long they expect kids to work on that. Quite often my sons would come home with, and it would say, this piece of homework should take them half an hour. Or they would say, only work for half an hour, because teachers also want to gauge how productive your child can be, how well they've understood the work. So again, if you say, right, we're going to do half an hour of maths because that's the homework, then you set a timer, but it's going to be half an hour of focused work. Okay, if you are going to try and change that routine, you might find that that child is struggling to shift, to make those connections. I think rules and consequences are really important. And when I say consequences, I don't necessarily mean like punishment, but if you don't get your work done, then you're likely to get into trouble at school tomorrow. Or if you spend too long playing, then you might not have time to have a longer bath. Okay. And always try and relate it to what's important for your child, what's motivating for them. And obviously you're going to change it to whatever level they're at. You're going to help them by breaking down any big tasks. So You know, if there's a project that they have to do, sometimes, you know, my kids have to do things like build moats and things like that. As you're going to help them break it down, you're not going to do it for them as much as you want to. You're going to help them break it down, okay? And generally, by breaking it down, you're going to say, okay, this is what needs to happen first, or this is the outcome. How are we going to get there? And you're going to work on that depending at which age or stage those kids are at. I like doing memory games, and I mean, I'll show you some at the end, but there are just loads and loads and loads of memory games that you can play. And I think even for us as adults, it's really important to try and constantly work on our memory. It's that whole idea of neuroplasticity, and just trying to say, okay, oh, how would I remember that number plate? Oh yeah, we could chunk it that way, or we could do word associations, that type of thing. Yeah. And hiding things at home. So you could, I mean, we'll come on to that later, but like a memory game, because, all right, I've got 10 things over here. I've covered it. Can you name all 10? Or I've covered it. I'm going to take one away. Close your eyes. What have I taken away? That type of thing. And you can do things like that just all the time. You don't need special games, special equipment. You don't need to spend a lot of money. I'm all for using things that you have at home, using things contextually. So in your bathroom, oh, what's normally over there where the towels are? Oh yeah, something's moved. Things like that, okay? Keeping your child motivated, keeping them involved and knowing what's in it for them, which again, you'll obviously explain at their level. Yeah, but if you can be really good at using lists, for example, then you can get through your work in a very quick and orderly fashion. Yeah, things like that. We've spoken a bit about organization, self-control techniques. We'll do a little bit more on that. And then teaching kids how to evaluate themselves. So teaching them, asking them things like, okay, was that your best work? Could you have done better? What did you look at the task again? What did you forget to do? And having them constantly question themselves as well. Okay. So in terms of routines, sorry, Noreen or Tom, can you see my box with your names on as well? I'm just thinking I should probably move that out of the way.
Sorry,
It's fine. I've moved it now. Don't worry.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I just see very distractible. Right. So when we set routines, it is really important. Oh, did someone say something? No. It's really important to help us establish order, for things to be predictable, and just good daily habits. So it might appear boring. It might look like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing again. But actually, that's where having that predictability means that anything you plan or organize or do is going to be done efficiently. It's going to be done efficiently. Okay. You can have a big chart at home. You can have a little checklist. And I'm really big on chores, or contributions, as I call them, and trying to fit those in on a daily basis, and just as a routine part of what kids can do to contribute at home, to help out at home. Okay. I can do a whole thing on chores and contributions, but I won't go into that now. For older kids, we say use a calendar or an agenda. Timers are really, really helpful. So a lot of homes have smartphones or smart devices such as Alexa or other such devices. And that's really useful for saying, okay, set a timer for 3 minutes, and then in 3 minutes that timer will go off. What I will often say is, if you are going to say set a reminder to go off in 3 minutes. Make sure that your child or you have told the device what to be reminded about. I've so many times had our Alexa go off and this is your reminder. And I'd be thinking, reminder to do what? Because okay. So that's something that's quite useful to do. If kids have smartphones, that's also something you can use. And there is a really good, it's like an executive functioning app for kids called, I think it's called Timeo, something like that. I will find the name for you. But so they're just a range of apps, and it's finding what's going to work for your child. What you'll also find is that what works for one child within your family is not necessarily going to work for another child. Same with one adult versus another adult. So in my household, there were 4 of us, and we all do things quite differently. And that's fine. I now have learned it's fine. So there's just another example, okay, of charts you can make. You can print charts off, you can make your own. I like, if you're going to use charts, I like to make them physical in the sense that the sheet on the left would be laminated, and the child has to actually physically make a mark with a marker or take it off. So Velcro is really good. Take off that little sign. You know, you could have all of those. The pictures could be in the boxes, and once they've done it, they can take it off or move it from one section to another, so that it is quite physical as well, because that really helps with remembering things. So again, we've spoken about homework time after school. If you think of us as adults, we are heavily incentivized. We get paid to work, and you know, we need to incentivize kids. So until your homework is done, you can't go on the tablet or do X, Y, and Z. And just sticking to that routine, that schedule. Or if you have a child who needs to just completely unwind and relax when they get in from school, then say, fine, you have got half an hour. Once you've got your clothes off, you're changed out of your uniform, get a snack, you've got half an hour. Let's set the timer for half an hour, and that will let us know when it's time to start homework. Okay? And just kind of making those habits so they just happen all the time. It's that consistency and that routine is really, really important. Okay. Sorry, that. Let's see how we're going. Okay. Rules and consequences, perhaps because my eldest son has Asperger's syndrome, autism, and we now think he might have ADHD as well. Perhaps because of that, I struggled initially, but we now have clear rules kind of in our house, and obviously they change as kids get older. But I think it's really important. Kids love rules. Well, in my experience, they love boundaries. They love knowing what they can and can't do, and what's expected of them. And obviously, you're going to make those expectations realistic and reasonable for that child, and they're going to be different for each of your kids. Okay, if you're going to have any visual aids are going to work really well. When we're talking about rules, we're not saying they have to be like super strict or excessive. It's just having something in place. Okay, so for example, when you walk into the house, you take your shoes off, and that's just always what you do. For example, if you come home from school, you always put your bag with all the other bags, go upstairs, get changed, and then come down. It's going to help you set those boundaries, the expectations. It's also going to help that child to develop self-control. Child, teenager, adolescent, adult, to just develop that self-control in that, okay, I may really want to go and lie in the sun because I know the dogs are coming home from their dog walk in an hour. However, I have to do X, Y, and Z first. So that's me then trying to enforce some self-control. What happens when we don't follow those? Think about the consequences you want to have, and just, as I said earlier, just be reasonable. And if you think about something like if a child's having a temper tantrum, is now the place to send them to the timeout corner, because they've lost control. They are in that completely irrational side of the brain. So trying to spend time to get them over there is just not going to be, it's not going to be useful for the child, and it's not going to be useful for you. So yeah. Okay. So when you break down big tasks, if you think of your child as having, so when I work with kids, whether they have an EHCP or not, we'll often set goals, okay? And we might have that the long-term goal is that Eddie wants to be able to cycle to the park with his older brothers and cycle back. And if Eddie at that point can't even ride a bike, that's going to seem like a really massive task to him. So we're going to break that down into medium-sized steps, and then each medium goal is going to have little goals on there. Okay, and it's the same thing. So you're going to have a massive task. So by the end of the 3 weeks, you have to build a model of I don't know what they do these days in history or whatever. So say a model of your local town. Just making that up. And then all the steps that you have to do, because saying to someone, yeah, you have to make a model, it's like, where do I even start? What do I need to do first? Let's look at the notes. Let's think, okay, this is how much time I have. This is how big it has to be, that type of thing. Okay, same thing like a book review. You have to, all the things you need to do. So you have to read the book and then plan and think, okay, this is how long it normally takes me to read. I'm also reading another book at the same time, so actually I don't have as much time. So you want to read the book. You might want to have them make notes as they go along. That might be a strategy for them. Then you're going to write your review. Then you're going to hand it in, okay? And having kind of dates or like timelines is really, really useful. And if we teach kids these now, it means that when they're older, when they're working, when they have their own flats, or they are, just doing more for themselves, is that they then can be independent and they can organize themselves. And, I think being independent is one of the most amazing things that we can teach our kids and give to them. Okay. So we think about motivation. A lot of kids don't have that internal motivation. They don't have that drive. Having to do things like make their beds is just boring and mundane. So they need external motivation. Yeah. And you're going to build this through any success, any enjoyment that they experience, and that positive reward. Okay. So what you're going to find is that the positive reward and the motivation will have much longer lasting effect, will mean more to them than not doing it. You can do things like verbal praise, star charts, rewards, and just thinking of doing, so if your child needs to do exercise, think of different exercise they can do, jumping activities are really useful. Yeah, so just finding things to keep them excited. Things like, okay, if you get through your homework and you do it all, you listen, you stick to it, we can have a game of Simon Says. Okay, so things like that. And try and also what I say is, if you are going to have games, always try and think of games that you may have to follow one object, or you may have to hold two things in your head at the same time, so you're constantly working on something like that, like spot the difference, or okay, look at this part of the room, close your eyes, I'm going to change something, what have I moved? Just little exercises like that that actually become games, and kids then find fun. Okay, I'm just going to move that up. So organizing, we're going to think about, when we think about chores, we want to think about those that involve any sorting or categorizing. So for example, unloading the dishwasher, the forks go with the forks, the knives go with the knives, and just putting things away in their correct places. Or if they have to match their laundry or fold their laundry. Okay, so I'm going to fold my pants and they're all going to go into that pile, things like that. Putting the groceries away, all the cans go there, all the yogurts go in this section, and starting that way. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so doing it that way. Okay. If you think of any card games, so my kids love card games, so we play a lot of things like Uno, Rummy, Crazy Eights, anything like that. There's a lot of organization that goes into something like Uno. So how are you going to hold your cards? How are you going to hold things so that only you see them and no one else does? How are you going to make sure that when you take a card out, the others aren't going to fall, and then working on that again. Okay, I think it's really useful to have a hobby that kids can develop, and you might find that it changes quite often. So all those like the Lego cards that they had the craze of collecting, you then sort those, or Pokemon cards or Go-Go's, or yeah, just anything like that where they have to sort and put it into categories. Yeah, because that will then help them to plan and think about what's going to go there. Oh, I still need X, Y, and Z. Organization also, just doing things like a daily plan, a daily checklist, well, weekly one. Usually weekly if a child doesn't have regular things that they need to do, but for older kids, they might have some daily tasks that need to be done. Okay, and with those, I think it's really important to have them, I say concrete, because something that they can physically scratch off or tick, rather than just a list on a phone or something like that. Or even if you have a list on a phone, make sure that it's something that you can then check or cross through it. Yeah. Let me just see. And yeah, so there could be loads of things, you know, more things that you can do. So what we've said, there's avoiding clutter, color coding things. One of the assessments that we do for fine motor skills is being able to organize a folder. So the kids get different colored paper and they then get dividers, and the instructions are to organize the folder so that the same colors of paper and dividers stay together. So activities like that. Okay, if you are at home and you've done, maybe you do your bills at the end of the month, you could have your child say, for example, I find these to be good holiday things, right? We need to sort out our files. Can you please put all the utility bills in one place, put those in another place, that type of thing. And you could say that you can do that at a set time, and just do it routinely and regularly. Okay, keeping things in a set place is really important. And there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of keep things where they are supposed to be. So let's see where we are. Okay, now with a lot of this, we're talking about self-control, and your self-control develops over time. It shouldn't stay the same. And it's about developing trust, establishing trust from an early age. If you think of parents who, when they have a baby and they are really responsive to their child's needs, they are going to foster a different type, a higher level of trust with their kids. When the baby wakes up and is crying, the dad goes, he picks him up, he feeds him. The baby then learns that actually I need to trust that food will come. And that child's then going to learn that eventually he will indeed get what has been promised. So you will get your pudding once you've had your main meal or things like that. And that just means that they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to become impatient or make themselves stress, because sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know if it's going to happen today. And then they just work themselves up. Yeah. It's really important that we also think about our own emotional regulation and our own emotional control and how we are towards our child, but also just towards others, because our kids are always watching, they're always listening, and that's where they learn from. Okay. If you'll find that a parent who, if there's some sort of drama or tantrum or some incident that's happened, those parents who are going to de-escalate that, who are going to soothe their child, what they're actually doing is they're helping their child build a brain which calms down more easily. Okay. Every time that child is soothed, the brain's going to strengthen those neural pathways for soothing and regulating. And eventually, you're going to get that child to soothe themselves. Okay. And being able to calm themselves, because you're not always there, or there's not always an adult there to sort out a problem. We talk about practice, because any action that's repeated is going to expand and strengthen the brain. And that's why it's so important to practice self-control. Okay. And just wait, it'll come. Practice. And with your practices, you're going to be absolutely consistent. So for example, after you do your homework, you can play, and you're going to practice something like this. If it's not something that you're doing currently, you're going to practice it over a few weeks to develop that self-control. And they're going to learn that they're working on that control to not ask every day if they can play rather than do homework. That child's then going to know, okay, mom's going to say no, dad's going to say no, so this is what I'm going to do. I know if I've done my homework, then I can play. So they're going to learn and know that that's what's happening. And that's why it's so important also to be consistent. So, and this is also important for your emotional regulation. So when your child doesn't display adequate self-control, it's really important, but also it's so hard to stay even and calm, and just you stay same, you stay consistent. Because if you, and I've done this so many times, if I then get stressed and I go, it's just not helping anyone. Okay. Really important to acknowledge our kids' emotions, trying to help them to identify those. And you can always start with just a few simple ones and then gradually add more complex emotions or words into that. Okay, it's like if a child is really upset because they can't have a chocolate, saying things like, it's really hard being told you have to wait for something. Yeah, and I can see that it's really upset you. So it's that kind of, that talking to them so that they then know what's happening in their own bodies. Okay. They're just some ideas to practice self-control. Statues is one of my favorite. Yeah, turn-taking games, etc. Okay. So just a bit more about those self-evaluating questions. It's a lot of it is also, as it says there, about your tone, how you're going to ask them is, do you think that was your best work? Or, you know, what do you think you could have done better? And this is really important for when they haven't been successful, rather than saying, oh, well, you didn't cut within the lines. You know, it's saying, how do you think it went? What could you do differently? If you think of one thing of this whole task, what is one thing you could easily improve on next time? Tell me how it felt like when your team lost their match, or when you didn't get all the house points. You know, that feeling of disappointment, the feeling of jealousy. You know, kids, it's human nature. We compare, they feel jealous, but they don't always know what that feeling is or how to describe it. And I think it's really important to model. So if I arrive somewhere late, then what I'm going to do, instead of bashing the steering wheel or shouting, is I can say, I am disappointed that I didn't leave early enough, and now we're late. You know, so you are constantly going to be verbalizing and expressing those feelings as well. And next time I'll make sure that I do X, Y, and Z. Okay. I think also often we don't. I don't know if we're scared, or we don't know how to be that open with kids and say when something's made you angry, or say when you're really disappointed. But that's how they're going to learn, right? It's by having those good role models. So they can talk to you. Right, so other little tips and tricks that you can do. So think about the accommodations you can make. Try and make them really realistic. Support that you can give your child. How can you help them keep a clear desk? Okay, you're going to have a little section which says pencils and sharpeners. You're going to do those things so they know where things are going to go. Okay. Always really try and think about their strengths. Think about what they can do and how they can use that. Think about how you can use their strengths. So you can say to your child, can you just check this for me? Because you're so good at noticing when something's not the same. Okay. So constantly building our kids up that way as well. Revisit your plans. If something needs to change it, and say, well, we've tried this 3 times, it's not working. Let's think about a different way of doing it. Okay. Negotiation is important. Kids are going to push back. They're going to negotiate. And I say, try and meet them halfway. Make a really good case to me, and yeah, we can see how that works. Let them try. Sometimes it's really hard to watch a child try something, and if you did it for them, it would be 120 times quicker, but they need to try, and they need to feel then to be praised for their effort, praised for trying. And as soon as they can do something, say, amazing, you no longer need me to do this bit. So now, and then you're just constantly working on motivating them, keeping them positive. And as they get older, you could do kind of these weekly check-ins. So my eldest son is now, he's just finishing his first year of A levels, and he says maybe he's a little autistic as well, and then we have the discussion about a little autistic, a lot autistic. But anyway, so he likes knowing what's going to happen, and so on a Sunday, he generally is the one to say what's happening this week, who's where, who's doing what. And even though I can put it on, we have a family calendar, which obviously no one checks. We have it on the fridge as well now, which says where everything is. He just likes to know at the start of the week who's doing what, and then we go through it again at the end of the night. Okay. Right. Let's see. Just check. Oopsie, sorry, my mouse is really weird. I will finish really soon so we can do some questions. Okay, so this is our last slide, and it's important to just remember your frustration tolerance is going to be tested. Just try and practice your own self-control when you're working with a child, an adult, or a partner who has executive function difficulties. If you collaborate on something, it is really useful for working on problem solving, because it keeps kids motivated. If they think they are actually really involved in where you're going on holiday, you know, that's going to keep them motivated. Show compassion. You know, when something's hard, go, oh my gosh, I can see that is really, really hard for you, but let's try it this way, or let's try it that way. And just keep the consistency. I can't stress that enough. It's just being consistent and just keeping it simple. Try not to overcommit, which is just quite hard to do sometimes. And, you know, you want your child to be successful. You want them to remain motivated, and then you're going to celebrate their achievements. You're going to praise them, praise their effort, praise them for trying. I'll often say things like, oh my gosh, if I see a child come, if I see a child for the first time and they're really struggling with cutting, and you can just see their whole bodies, I often say things like, that's the best cutting I've seen all day. And it's not necessarily a lie, because they might be the first child I'm seeing. But it's just, you just want to constantly be keeping them motivated, feel like they're being seen, and that their efforts are being seen as well. Okay. Lots of games you can play. There's some memory games. Yeah, just loads and loads and loads. So I am going to stop the share there and ask for questions. Okay. Shall I go through the questions in the chat box? I'll do that first, and then we can just take it from there, if that's all right with everyone. So there was a question from Mariam. Does medication help to improve executive functioning? So this is a great question. I think I see executive functioning difficulties and ADHD to really go hand in hand. I can only speak from personal experiences. When I went onto medication for ADHD, it literally, and I know it sounds all a bit touchy-feely, it literally changed my life, because I could focus on one thing at a time. I could make a plan and I could stick to it. Yeah, that impulsivity was gone, but that's just me. And I know that there are a lot of people who opt, oopsie, that's my chair just went, who opt for to not have medication. It just makes things that much harder. I think that's just a completely personal, you know, medication is as one of those really, really personal choices that you make. What I do say to all the parents I see, adolescents, if you are going to take medication, we're having this discussion right now with my eldest son, who's just doing his first year at university, and he came home and he said, oh, I read the book. He read the book that I wrote, and he said, I think I do have ADHD. His question was a very typical student question, which was, can I still drink alcohol if I'm on medication? Which for us, we really celebrated that, because as a child who, in his 2 years of being at Reigate College, he went to 2 parties, because he's not, you know, he's autistic. He doesn't do that. It's exhausting for him. So actually, lockdown and COVID has actually been a blessing for us, because he could go to university and there were very clear parameters, there were very clear boundaries. You could go out, but only with this number of people, and be back at this time. And that was, for us as a family and for him, was a great introduction. So yeah, one of the positive things I have to remember that has come out of COVID, a lot of positive things. So yeah, sorry, Miriam, you can see I talk too much. So yeah, medication, I would say yes. It just depends on you and your child. Okay. Claudia, hi Claudia. Do you tend to work on one area at once? For example, really want son to get self-dressed, but he also often refuses to do homework. Need to work on both, really. I would say yes, work on one thing at a time. Something like getting themselves dressed, I think, is really useful to do at weekends, holidays, half terms, when you're generally not stressed. Trying to teach a child to dress themselves and to be quick in the morning when you're in a rush is just, it's a recipe for disaster. So I would say think of the one thing and work on that. Okay. So it might be that you look at refusal of homework. So talk to him. Which part of the homework is he struggling with? Making plans for those, starting really small. So I would say try and, if you're really going to focus on one thing, I would say focus on one thing at a time. You can always work on dressing in, like, make it a game. Okay, who can put on the most silly clothes the quickest? That type of thing. I wouldn't try to practice anything when you're in a rush, when you're stressed. Mornings in my household used to be disastrous, but that was because of me. My kids had their routines sorted out completely fine. So I hope that answers your question. Are there any apps that you recommend to help children with the organization time management? So there are lots of apps. I find having just like the planning app that comes with your tablet, like those standard ones, I have learned over the years that it's not about how fancy the app is or my diary or my planner. It's about me using it consistently. I hope that makes sense. So if I always go back to, let's use Microsoft's to-do list, or let's use this. But actually, I always come back to pen and paper, or I use both. So I think it really is quite individual. There is one called, the one I mentioned, I think it's Timeo or Timeo. Yeah, I will find it and then I will, I'll let you know. Sorry, it's on my phone or on my laptop. Yeah, but so things like that, I think it really just depends. There's a lot out there. Find what's going to work for your child and your family. Basics often work really well. When you have older kids who love using smart devices, Alexa is a godsend. Yeah, okay. I hope that answers your question, Paula. I wasn't very specific. Are there any other questions, any other comments? Okay, Rosie. My son was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at age 5. He has issues with executive function and is now at uni and really struggling with taking notes and listening at the same time. Okay, do you have any suggestions? So I don't know if he's in his first year of uni, is he, Rosie? So I know what has been a godsend for my son is the fact that things were all online and things were recorded. So he could go back and listen to those recordings and make those notes. I don't know if he was doing anything in person, but I know my son, everything was online. So for him, he found that really useful. I think when you're struggling with taking notes, always tell the school, the university, let them know exactly what your child's difficulties are, because they do support and they can hand out the notes ahead of time or afterwards. Okay, so then all you then have to do is just listen You don't have to worry about taking notes because you're going to get those handouts. You might just make notes which are really, really basic. And yeah, so things like that you can definitely work on. Yeah, so I would say speak to the university, speak to the college, speak to his mentor, ask if there's any way that notes can be given before or after, or that they know exactly which chapter they're going to be working on, so then they can prepare beforehand. Okay. Michelle, I hope that answers your question, Rosie. You can always message me for more information. I'm going to be quizzing my son when he comes back from university next week to ask him questions. He won't be impressed, but yeah. Michelle, so do medications help with all executive function skills or just some? And does ADHD child grow out of the executive function difficulties? I did not grow out of my ADHD difficulties. I didn't know I had ADHD. So I would say if you have ADHD as a child, you're never going to grow out of that ADHD. You're always going to struggle, but you're going to learn those strategies and you're going to find the ones that work for you. And that's going to be the really important thing. I think in terms of the medication, it depends on what that child is going to be having, how much they're going to be having, how their body responds to that. So I can only speak personally. I think for me, being on medication has really affected everything. Just, yeah, absolutely everything. But that's just me. A lot of it was that impulse control for me, which then leaves me going off into 100 different directions. And so that's been, that's how it's helped me, Michelle. Sorry, I don't know if that's enough of an answer for you. Right, let's see. I'm just gonna see if there are any more questions. Noreen, Rosie, Rob, Chloe, Gary, Lisa, Michelle, another Gary, Marianne, Paula, and someone called iPad. Any other questions, please let me know, or you can always email me. Yeah. I'm trying to think. You can start working on executive functions from a very young age. When kids are in nursery, I do some work with some early years providers, and we look at those executive functioning skills and how you can develop those from nursery. And yeah, I think that's useful to know. I'm just going to try and see. I can find some references to send you. But yeah, I will find some references for you, because there's a lot that we can do to promote executive functioning just in everyday life. So yeah, as I said, I do a lot of kind of coaching for kids, the older kids, and we spend hours on it. Thank you, Michelle. Helpful to hear my perspective. Yes, so if I wasn't speaking too fast. Noreen, Tom, we go. Oh, sorry, hold on. Mariam had a question. If an adult believes to have ADHD, where would they go for help? Wow, Mariam, very interesting question. So you can, if you go to your GP, there's a website. So I've done a lot of research into adults with ADHD, because I'm still amazed that I didn't realize I had it. So if you go, there's a website called, I will find it, but there's a website where they will give you template letters that you take to your GP. I would say fill out any questionnaires you can find online, make those checklists, and then there's a questionnaire that you take to your GP. I think it's called something like Right to Choose or Right to Refer, and basically you don't have to wait for ages and ages. You will then be referred to a private organization, and it just speeds up the process, and you don't have to always, and those private rates are either a lot cheaper or they are free. I don't quite know how it works. I didn't use it because I was impulsive, and so I just wanted to get an answer straight away. Yeah, so I will, Tom, Noreen, please remind me, and I will send you the information for that. There's also an amazing ADHD for Adults Help page on Facebook, which is just, it's phenomenal. And again, I will send the details for that as well. And everything is laid out on there if you need support with various things. If it's adults, you are working, your employer gets access to money where they can make a lot of reasonable adjustments, such as really high quality noise cancelling headphones, seating options. So I have a saddle seat, which you saw me fall off a little bit earlier because I'm constantly moving. Yeah, so things like that can all those adjustments can be made. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Let me know. Email me. You've got my email address. And yeah.
Thanks, Aniesa. That was really great. Thanks for attending, everyone. I will send out a recording. I will send out the slides so you can have those. And I will also let you know of other upcoming parent talks that Aniesa is doing in June and July on stuff like eating difficulties, dyspraxia, sensory processing, and visual perception. So please join us for those as well. And I'll send that all out in an email. But thanks for attending, and thanks a lot, Aniesa.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Thank you for your morning, and yeah, just message me. I'm always on my messages. So yeah, anyone have a question, just let me know. Okay, so yeah, goodbye everybody. That was great. Thank you.